A decorated black Marine sniper returns home only to be brutally handcuffed, publicly shamed, and accused of crimes he didn't commit, trapped in a corrupt system designed to crush him. His future hangs by a thread. Then, in a stunning turn, a four-star general storms the courtroom, his salute silencing everyone. What explosive truth will shatter this injustice? Find out in Cops Handcuffed, a black Marine sniper. Then a four-star general entered the courtroom to apologize. Marcus Tate had not anticipated a homecoming. Not like this. The dust of Iraq still clung to his combat boots, metaphorical and real. As he stepped off the bus in his hometown, he'd served 2 tours, a sniper, precise and disciplined, lauded for keeping his team alive in impossible situations, but on Main Street, under the glare of a Friday afternoon sun. The only precision he encountered was the swift, brutal clamp of handcuffs. He was barely out of the bus station's shadow when the cruiser's tires squealed to a halt beside him. 2 officers, beefy and grim, emerged. 1. Officer Miller, a man whose face he vaguely recalled from high school, fixed him with an unnerving stare. Marcus Tate Miller's voice was low, flat. Tate, still carrying his duffel bag, nodded. "That's right, we have a warrant for your arrest. Mr. Tate, grand theft auto and aggravated assault." The words hit him like a physical blow. Grand theft auto assault. He hadn't even owned a car in years, much less stolen one. He'd been halfway across the world, staring down insurgents, not joyriding back home. "There's a mistake," Tate stated, his voice calm despite the surge of adrenaline. "I've been deployed. I just got back." The other officer, a younger, more aggressive man named Jenkins, snorted. "Save it for the judge. Buddy, hands behind your back." Before Tate could protest further, Miller grabbed his arm, yanking it roughly. The duffel bag dropped, its contents spilling slightly, a worn t-shirt, a small framed photo of his deceased grandmother, his military ID. Jenkins' eyes flickered to the ID, a brief pause, then a sneer. "Oh, a Marine. Guess that makes you above the law." Huh. A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the flashing lights in the escalating scene. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. Tate felt their eyes, judging, condemning, already writing his story as a delinquent, a returning veteran gone rogue. The public shaming was immediate, a hot flush of indignity rising in his chest. He saw a few familiar faces, former classmates, neighbors, their expressions shifting from curiosity to pity, then to a detached curiosity. No one stepped forward. "I'm telling you, this is wrong," Tate insisted, his voice hardening. He didn't resist physically, but his posture was rigid, a lifetime of military discipline asserting itself even in the face of injustice. Miller twisted his arm higher, forcing a wince from Tate. The steel cuffs bit into his wrists, cold and unyielding. Jenkins rifled through his duffel bag, tossing his meager belongings onto the grimy sidewalk. The photo of his grandmother landed face down, searching for weapons. "Marine," Jenkins mumbled, not looking at him, clearly enjoying the public spectacle. He pulled out a small, nondescript flip phone. "What's this disposable you trying to stay off the grid?" Tate's jaw tightened. "It's just a phone. Likely story." Jenkins pocketed it. "Anything else we should know about?" "Mr. Tate, any more surprises?" The police car reeked of stale coffee and something metallic. The ride to the precinct was short, punctuated by Miller's dismissive remarks about returning vets with chips on their shoulders. At the station, the humiliation continued. He was processed, fingerprinted, photographed. Each flash of the camera felt like a branding iron, marking him as a criminal. He was stripped of his dignity, his identity reduced to a set of prints and a mugshot. He was placed in a holding cell, cold and desolate. The air was thick with despair, the scent of antiseptic and stale body odor. Hours passed, no phone call, no explanation beyond the initial vague accusations. He sat on the hard bunk, his mind racing, trying to piece together how this nightmare had unfolded. He had been a decorated sniper, a man who had put his life on the line for his country. Now he was just another black man in handcuffs, another statistic in a system that seemed designed to crush. Later that evening, a public defender, a young woman named Ms. Hayes, arrived. Her eyes, wired and wary, scanned his file. Marcus Tate, she read, her voice devoid of inflection. The charges are serious, very serious. The DA wants to make an example. She didn't offer sympathy, only a bleak assessment of his chances. They have eyewitness accounts and surveillance footage. Surveillance footage eyewitnesses, Tate's mind reeled. He'd been in a sand-swept desert, not this quiet, forgotten town. He tried to explain his deployment, his alibi. Miss Hayes listened, nodding politely, but her expression remained unconvinced. She'd heard it all before, the innocent protestations, the convenient alibis. His military service, once a badge of honor, now seemed to make him more suspicious in their eyes. As the night wore on, the weight of the injustice settled heavily on him. He was trapped, caught in a system that didn't care about the truth, only about convictions. The public targeting had stripped him bare, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The cell door clanged shut once more, the sound echoing the finality of his predicament. He was a veteran, a hero to some, but in this town, he was just another suspect, his race and circumstance twisting the narrative against him. The tension in the small, cramped cell was suffocating, a precursor to the storm brewing outside the next morning. The preliminary hearing was a blur of legalese and grim faces. Judge Karen, a woman with a severe bun and an equally severe demeanor, presided. Her gaze swept over the courtroom, dismissing the few spectators as if they were inconsequential dust motes. Marcus, flanked by Ms. Hayes, stood accused, the prosecutor painting a picture of a violent, unhinged veteran, fresh from war and looking for trouble. The eyewitness was a local informant with a checkered past, his testimony flimsy but delivered with conviction. The surveillance footage was grainy, distant, showing a figure vaguely resembling Marcus at the scene of the alleged crime. It was a setup, Marcus realized, a crude but effective frame. The prosecutor, a young, ambitious man named Mr. Davies, laid out his case with theatrical flair. This isn't about a returning hero, Your Honor. This is about a man who committed a heinous crime, a man who thought his service would shield him from justice. He gestured dramatically towards Marcus. The evidence is clear. We have a victim, a stolen vehicle, and Mr. Tate placing himself conveniently, or inconveniently, at the scene. Ms. Hayes countered weakly, citing Marcus's military record. His deployment dates, Judge Karen cut her off. His service is irrelevant to these charges. Ms. Hayes, we are here to determine guilt or innocence regarding the current allegations. The courtroom was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus felt the weight of every eye, every unspoken judgment. He was on the verge of being condemned, his future crumbling. The feeling of helplessness was a suffocating shroud. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, picturing the vast, empty deserts of Iraq, the precision of his rifle, the lives he had saved. It felt like a lifetime ago, a different man in a different world. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the courtroom doors. The heavy oak doors swung open, and a hush fell over the room as a figure entered. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a crisp military uniform, adorned with an array of ribbons and badges. On his shoulders, 4 silver stars gleamed, the insignia of a 4-star general. A ripple of murmurs went through the stunned courtroom. Judge Karen, visibly startled, adjusted her spectacles. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice losing some of its usual imperiousness. The general, his gaze fixed on Marcus, ignored her. He walked with a deliberate, powerful stride, his eyes never leaving Marcus's. He stopped directly in front of the defense table, his presence commanding, radiating an authority that dwarfed even the judges. Marcus, bewildered, stared back. He didn't recognize the man. The general then did something extraordinary. He snapped to attention, his back ramrod straight, and rendered a sharp, precise salute directly at Marcus Tate. The sound of his palm hitting his brow echoed in the silent courtroom. It was a gesture of profound respect, of military protocol, usually reserved for superior officers or fallen comrades. General Michael Reeve, United States Marine Corps, reporting, Your Honor. The general finally stated, his voice deep and resonant. Filling the room, I apologize for the interruption, but I believe there has been a grave miscarriage of justice. Judge Karen's face was a mask of disbelief. General Reeve, what is the meaning of this? General Reeve's gaze finally shifted to her, his eyes piercing. Your Honor, Mr. Marcus Tate is not just a former Marine. He is a national hero. He was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action and a Purple Heart for wounds sustained in combat. But more than that, he paused, his voice dropping slightly, but carrying weight. On April 12th, during an operation in the Al-Anbar province, my convoy was ambushed. We were heavily outnumbered, pinned down, taking heavy casualties. I was wounded, my comms destroyed, and my team was on the verge of being overrun. He looked back at Marcus. Sergeant Tate, against impossible odds, moved alone across 800 meters of open ground, under sustained enemy fire. To a vantage point, he systematically neutralized the enemy positions, suppressing fire long enough for a rescue team to extract us. He saved my life, Your Honor. He saved the lives of every man in my convoy. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The prosecutor, Mr. Davies, looked utterly dumbfounded, his jaw slack. Officer Miller and Jenkins, seated behind him, exchanged panicked glances. Judge Karen's stern demeanor had crumbled, replaced by a mixture of shock and dawning horror. General Reeve continued, his voice unwavering. Sergeant Tate was discharged just 3 days ago. He was on a special, classified assignment immediately prior to his return. He could not have been in this city at the time of the alleged crime. His alibi is ironclad. He was saving American lives, while your eyewitness was likely fabricating stories for a reward. He then turned back to Marcus, his salute still held. Sergeant Tate, on behalf of the United States Marine Corps and a grateful nation, I regret the indignity you have suffered. You are a patriot, a warrior, and you deserve nothing but our utmost respect. He dropped his salute. I am here to personally escort Sergeant Tate from this courtroom and ensure he receives the justice he is due. The revelation hung in the air, a shocking secret unveiled, shattering the carefully constructed narrative of Marcus Tate. The criminal, the power dynamic in the courtroom had shifted irrevocably, dramatically. The air, once thick with condemnation, now crackled with an electric tension of revelation and profound shame. Marcus, still processing the general's words, felt a tremor run through him, not of fear, but of a long-suppressed hope. The courtroom erupted into a chaotic murmur that Judge Karen struggled to quell. Her face, a blotchy red, betrayed her shock and humiliation. The prosecutor, Mr. Davies, stuttered, attempting to regain his composure. But the general's words had ripped through his carefully constructed case. Your Honor, Davies finally managed, his voice thin. While we respect General Reeve's service, his testimony is unprecedented in this setting. This is a local matter. We have local evidence. General Reeve turned to Davies, his eyes like steel. Your local evidence, Mr. Davies, is predicated on a lie, a fabricated alibi for a man who was serving his country. Are you suggesting the U.S. Marine Corps is complicit in a grand theft auto scheme? His tone was laced with an icy disdain that made Davies visibly shrink. Judge Karen, though shaken, still clutched at the remnants of her authority. General Reeve, your presence and testimony are noted. However, the court requires a formal deposition, and this is a preliminary hearing, not a full trial. She cleared her throat, trying to project an air of control, given the extraordinary circumstances. I will recess this hearing to allow for further investigation into Mr. Tate's alibi and the validity of the charges. She pounded her gavel, a weak, desperate sound. Court is adjourned until next Monday. The courtroom doors parted for General Reeve and Marcus, But the respite was short-lived. Outside, the local police, particularly officers Miller and Jenkins, were already moving. The general's intervention had saved Marcus from immediate incarceration, but it had also ignited a furious backlash from the very authorities he had just publicly shamed. As Marcus and the general stepped into the glaring sunlight, a phalanx of local reporters, alerted by the unusual activity, swarmed them. "General Reeve, is the Marine Corps intervening in a local criminal case?" a reporter shouted. "Sergeant Tate, what do you say to the victims of these crimes?" another pressed, their microphones thrust forward. General Reeve, ever composed, addressed them briefly. "Sergeant Tate's alibi is irrefutable. We will ensure justice is served." He shielded Marcus, guiding him towards a waiting military vehicle. But even as they drove away, Marcus saw Miller and Jenkins watching, their faces contorted with a silent fury. The next few days were a relentless siege. The local press, fueled by leaks from the police department, began a subtle smear campaign. Anonymous sources, supposedly from law enforcement, painted Marcus as a troubled veteran, prone to fits of rage, using his military past as a shield. News reports highlighted his race, subtly linking him to a narrative of urban crime. Despite his distinguished service, the initial public sympathy generated by General Reeve's dramatic appearance began to erode under the relentless drip of insinuation. Ms. Hayes, Marcus's public defender, found herself increasingly marginalized. "They're isolating us." "Marcus," she explained, her voice tight over the phone, "every legal avenue I try, they're blocking. The DA's office is stonewalling, refusing to acknowledge the general's testimony as formal evidence without a lengthy process. They're claiming it's a federal matter interfering with a local one. The abuse escalated beyond the legal." Marcus found himself under constant surveillance. A patrol car seemed permanently parked a block from his temporary residence, a small apartment provided by the general's staff. He was stopped twice for routine traffic violations while riding in a borrowed car, each time subjected to aggressive questioning in a thorough search of the vehicle. His new landlord received anonymous calls, threatening to report him for housing a known criminal. His credit, previously pristine, mysteriously flagged for suspicious activity, making it impossible to rent a car or open a bank account without immense scrutiny. One evening, while walking to a convenience store, two men in plain clothes, clearly off-duty officers, cornered him in an alley. They didn't touch him, but their words were sharp, venomous. "You think a fancy general can save you, Marine? This is our town. You messed with the wrong people. We'll make sure you pay." One way or another, their eyes promised retribution. A chilling reminder that even with a general's backing, the local system was still a formidable, vengeful beast. Marcus stood his ground, his military training keeping his outward composure. But the cold knot of dread in his stomach tightened. The betrayal came from a different quarter. A former comrade, Sergeant Davies, no relation to the prosecutor, who had served with Marcus in Iraq, was suddenly everywhere on local news. He spoke of Marcus's unstable temperament under pressure, of incidents that were conveniently vague but damaging. This was a man Marcus had saved, a man he had trusted. The fabricated stories twisted his combat experiences into something sinister, exploiting the public's ignorance and fear of veterans with PTSD. It was a calculated, insidious blow, designed to undermine General Reeve's glowing endorsement and to portray Marcus as unhinged, dangerous, and unworthy of trust. This betrayal hit Marcus harder than any police harassment. It was a knife in the back from someone he had bled with. He understood then that this wasn't just about a mistaken arrest. It was a desperate, coordinated effort by local authorities to save face, to reassert their power, and to crush anyone who exposed their incompetence or corruption. They were pushing him to the brink, isolating him, trying to break his spirit before he could fight back. The stakes had never been higher. He was not just fighting for his freedom, he was fighting for his reputation, his sanity, and perhaps his life. Marcus Tate felt the walls closing in, the constant surveillance, the veiled threats. the insidious media campaign. It was designed to break him, to make him lash out, to prove their narrative of the angry, unstable veteran. But beneath the frustration, a cold resolve began to harden. They wanted a fight. He would give them one. His unexpected act of defiance came not in a courtroom or on the streets, but through a seemingly insignificant detail. Ms. Hayes, despite her initial skepticism, was now fully committed. General Reeves' dramatic entrance had not just swayed the court, it had ignited a spark of conviction in her, a realization that something truly rotten was at play. "Marcus," she said, her voice low and urgent during a clandestine meeting in a noisy coffee shop, away from prying ears. "I've been digging into the surveillance footage from the alleged crime. It's thin, almost too thin. And the eyewitness, that informant, he's got a history of cutting deals. What if the footage isn't just grainy? What if it's been tampered with Marcus's mind, honed by years of tactical analysis, latched onto the idea, tampered how cropped, altered potentially?" Miss Hayes confirmed, "But I need help. Forensic video analysis costs a fortune, and we have no budget. And if I file a motion to challenge the evidence, they'll just bury us in paperwork and delays." This was where the underestimated ally entered. Among the small group of Marcus's former soldiers who had quietly attended the initial hearing was a man named Corporal Ramirez. Ramirez had been Marcus's comms specialist, a whiz with electronics and data. Quiet but intensely loyal. He hadn't said much, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, had missed nothing. Marcus contacted Ramirez. "I need you to look at some video. Corporal, off the books. Something only you can do." Ramirez, without hesitation, agreed. "Anything for you." "Sergeant, you saved my life more times than I can count." Miss Hayes cautiously provided the general details of the surveillance footage, unable to legally share the actual evidence. Ramirez, working in the shadows, managed to acquire a copy through his own network of contacts, a network that included a few disgruntled IT professionals who worked for the city. It took him 2 days, working tirelessly, hunched over a laptop in a secure, undisclosed location. When he finally called Marcus, his voice was tight with suppressed fury. "Sergeant, you need to see this. The footage isn't just grainy. It's been digitally manipulated, sloppily, but effectively enough to fool a quick glance. The figure they claim is you. It's a composite, parts of different frames spliced together, and the timestamp, it's been slightly adjusted." Marcus felt a surge of cold triumph. This was it. The proof. The clear, undeniable evidence of their malicious intent. "Can you prove it?" "Beyond a shadow of a doubt, I've created a side-by-side analysis, frame by frame, showing the anomalies, the pixelation discrepancies, the impossible movements. I've even identified the software they likely used. It's amateurish, but damning. This isn't just about making you look guilty, Sergeant. This is about making you look like someone else entirely." The revelation was staggering. They hadn't just fabricated an alibi. They had fabricated him. This was not a simple misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, malicious act of character assassination. Marcus and Miss Hayes met with General Reeves, presenting Ramirez's findings. The general, a man not easily shocked, reviewed the analysis with a grim expression. "This is beyond egregious," he finally stated, his voice low and dangerous. "This is a conspiracy, and it goes higher than just a couple of rogue cops." General Reeves immediately moved. He didn't go through official channels. He went through military intelligence contacts. Leveraging his immense influence and the gravity of a 4-star general's accusation of a conspiracy involving a decorated war hero, he bypassed the local system. Knowing it was compromised, within hours, a small, highly specialized team of federal investigators, answerable only to the highest levels, was discreetly dispatched. They operated outside the usual chains of command, their movements ghost-like. The unexpected act of defiance wasn't a dramatic courtroom outburst, but a quiet, calculated counterstrike using an underestimated ally and irrefutable technical proof. Ramirez, the quiet comms specialist, had provided the surgical precision needed to expose the heart of the corruption. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was exposing the truth. The information, a ticking time bomb, was now in the hands of someone powerful enough to detonate it. The tables had turned. The hunter had become the hunted, and the next confrontation would be explosive. The next Monday, the courtroom was a powder keg, the air thick with anticipation. Judge Karen sat on the bench, a veneer of composure barely masking her unease. Mr. Davies, the prosecutor, strutted with a renewed, albeit fragile, confidence from Omarians. He believed the general's earlier display was just a fluke, a momentary diversion. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Marcus, standing beside Miss Hayes, felt a surge of cold fury. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person the system had crushed. Every injustice swept under the rug. He saw Officers Miller and Jenkins in the gallery, smirking, confident in their victory. As Judge Karen called the court to order, a figure entered from the back, not General Reeve this time, but a stern-faced woman in a tailored suit, accompanied by two equally somber individuals. She walked with an air of quiet authority, her gaze sweeping the room. This was Special Agent Thorne, head of the federal investigative team General Reeve had dispatched. "Your Honor," Agent Thorne stated, her voice calm but cutting through the hushed courtroom like a scalpel. "I apologize for the interruption. Special Agent Thorne, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have obtained a federal warrant regarding the evidence presented in the case of the state versus Marcus Tate." She held up a thick manila folder. "Specifically, we have uncovered irrefutable evidence of systematic evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and a coordinated effort to frame Mr. Tate." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Mr. Davies' face went white. Judge Karen's eyes widened, a flicker of fear replacing her usual sternness. Agent Thorne continued, her voice gaining momentum. "Our investigation, initiated by concerns raised by General Michael Reeve and conducted with the full cooperation of Mr. Tate's defense counsel, has revealed that the surveillance footage used as primary evidence was digitally altered. We have identified the software used, the specific manipulation techniques, and even the IP addresses from which the alterations were made." She turned, her gaze landing squarely on Officer Jenkins, then on Officer Miller. "Our forensic analysis indicates that the individual in the footage, purportedly Mr. Tate, was a composite of multiple individuals, with facial features artificially overlaid. The timestamp was adjusted to deliberately contradict Mr. Tate's proven military deployment records." The courtroom was a silent, stunned tableau. No one moved. Agent Thorne then played a short, stark video on a portable screen, which was immediately broadcast on the courtroom's large monitor. It showed the original grainy footage alongside Ramirez's meticulously enhanced and analyzed version, highlighting the inconsistencies, the pixel distortions, the impossible movements. The difference was undeniable. Damning. "Furthermore," Agent Thorne pressed on, her voice rising, "we have secured a confession from the key eyewitness, Mr. Robert Bobby Jenkins, the same Officer Jenkins who arrested Mr. Tate." Mr. Jenkins has admitted, under federal interrogation, to fabricating his eyewitness account and to actively participating in the alteration of the surveillance footage. Under direct orders from superior officers, the bombshell detonated. Robert Jenkins, the younger, aggressive officer who had initially arrested Marcus, collapsed in his seat, his face ashen. While Officer Miller stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, sweat beading on his forehead. "In addition," Thorne stated, her voice echoing with controlled outrage, "we have also uncovered a pattern of misconduct within this department, including the targeting of individuals based on their race, a network of informants coerced into providing false testimony, and a history of suppressing exculpatory evidence. This was not an isolated incident. It was a systemic abuse of power." She then turned to Judge Karen, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Your Honor, Based on this federal investigation, we are requesting immediate arrests of Officer Robert Jenkins and Lieutenant Thomas Miller on charges of obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and civil rights violations. We are also recommending a full federal review of this court's recent cases, especially those involving similar patterns of evidence and informant testimony. The courtroom erupted into a frenzy. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. The general public, who had started to side with the police narrative, now murmured in outrage. Judge Karen, her face drained of color, could only stare, her gavel lying uselessly before her. The power had shifted decisively and publicly. The very authority figures who had sought to destroy Marcus Tate were now facing their own reckoning, broadcast live for all to see. The immediate aftermath of Agent Thorne's explosive revelations was a whirlwind of motion and consequence. Judge Karen, her authority irrevocably shattered, had no choice but to comply. The courtroom, still reeling from the shock, watched as Officer Jenkins, pale and trembling, was led away in handcuffs by federal agents. Lieutenant Miller, defiant but clearly shaken, followed shortly after, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. The once smirking faces of the local police in the gallery had turned to grim horror, their whispered conversations now frantic, fearful. The news spread like wildfire. Local television stations, initially cautious in their reporting, now carried the story live, their anchors struggling to keep up with the cascading developments. National news picked it up. The dramatic narrative of a decorated Marine sniper framed by corrupt local law enforcement providing a potent, infuriating story. The grainy footage of the manipulated surveillance, juxtaposed with Marcus's impeccable military record and General Reeves' earlier endorsement, became a symbol of systemic injustice. Marcus Tate, once a nameless suspect, was now a reluctant national figure. He was no longer just fighting for his freedom. He was exposing a deeper rot. The federal investigation, now openly acknowledged, began to peel back layers of corruption that had long festered within the city's legal and law enforcement systems. Whistleblowers, emboldened by Agent Thorne's public action, started coming forward, anonymously at first, then more openly. They spoke of quota arrests, of evidence planting, of snitches coerced into giving false testimony against innocent individuals. Mrs. Hayes, her initial wariness replaced by fierce determination, became a key figure in assisting the federal inquiry. Her meticulous notes, her years of dealing with the very system now under scrutiny, proved invaluable. She facilitated connections between the federal agents and other public defenders, who had their own suspicions about similar cases. The quiet, underappreciated work of public defenders, often dismissed as simply processing the accused, was suddenly validated and amplified. General Reeve, through his powerful network, ensured that the military's full support for Marcus was unwavering. He publicly condemned the actions of the local authorities, emphasizing the profound disservice done to a combat veteran and, by extension, to all who served. His statements carried immense weight, putting pressure on both federal and local governments to act swiftly and decisively. The public backlash against the city's police department and district attorney's office was immediate and fierce. Protests erupted outside the courthouse and the police station. Calls for resignations mounted. The mayor's office issued a series of increasingly frantic statements, promising full cooperation with the federal investigation, even as their own complicity was being questioned. Marcus, however, was not content to simply be a victim. He understood the momentum his case had generated, the opportunity it presented. He became a calm, articulate voice for change. He gave measured, powerful interviews, not filled with anger, but with a quiet demand for accountability. "This isn't just about me," he reiterated in a televised interview, his gaze steady. "This is about a system that preys on the vulnerable, that disregards truth, that undermines the very concept of justice. My experience was public, thanks to General Reeve, but how many others suffer in silence, He called for independent oversight of police departments, for mandatory body cameras, for stricter accountability for prosecutors. He used his platform to highlight the struggles of other veterans, disproportionately targeted by minor infractions, often due to lack of support or resources upon their return home. The chaos of his public shaming was turning into a powerful, organized movement for systemic reform. The very forces that tried to silence him had inadvertently given him a megaphone. The city, once content to sweep its dirty secrets under the rug, was now forced to confront them. Under the glaring spotlight of national attention, the federal investigation, spearheaded by Agent Thorne, culminated in a series of arrests and indictments that rocked the city to its core. Not just Miller and Jenkins, but the district attorney, a handful of high-ranking police captains, and even Judge Karen herself were implicated in a sprawling conspiracy that went far beyond Marcus Tate's case. The charges ranged from obstruction of justice and evidence tampering to systemic civil rights violations and the unlawful targeting of minority communities for arrests that inflated crime statistics and justified increased funding. The twist came not from a single revelation, but from a calculated, public outmaneuvering of the last vestiges of the old guard. A special, televised hearing was convened by a federal oversight committee, a body normally operating in the shadows, but now thrust into the spotlight by the national attention Marcus's case had garnered. The hearing was held in the same courthouse, but this time, the entire proceedings were broadcast live, cameras capturing every detail, every facial expression. The city's mayor, desperate to salvage his political career, appeared before the committee, attempting to distance himself from the scandal, feigning ignorance and promising swift reforms. He was cornered by Agent Thorne, who presented irrefutable evidence of his office's direct knowledge of the police department's unlawful practices, including internal reports that had been suppressed and complaints from citizens that had been systematically ignored. The mayor, caught in a web of his own lies, crumbled under the relentless questioning, his image collapsing live on national television. But the final, most impactful blow was delivered not by a federal agent or a politician, but by Marcus Tate himself. He was called to testify, not as a witness for the prosecution, but as the primary victim, a living testament to the corruption. He walked into the packed hearing room, his military bearing evident, his gaze steady. He didn't grandstand. He didn't recount tales of his heroism in combat. Instead, he spoke with quiet power, detailing the raw, humiliating experience of his arrest, the public shaming, the isolation, the insidious smear campaign. He then, with Miss Hayes at his side, delivered the final, undeniable twist. They tried to make me invisible. Marcus began, his voice clear, amplified by the microphones. They tried to make me disappear into a statistic, but they forgot one thing. He paused, looking directly into the camera. They forgot that even in darkness, there are those who see and those who will speak. He then revealed a crucial piece of information that had been held in reserve. A true shocking secret. Corporal Ramirez, the quiet comm specialist, had not only exposed the tampering of the surveillance footage, but had also managed to recover deleted communications from a hidden server within the police department's network. These communications, presented as unredacted texts and emails, revealed explicit instructions from high-ranking officials to neutralize Marcus Tate, not just legally, but personally. They discussed planting additional false evidence if the initial charges failed, even implying physical harm if he continued to fight. The messages explicitly showed the true extent of the conspiracy, reaching far beyond the initial frame-up, indicating a deliberate, coordinated effort to silence him permanently. This was not just about a botched arrest. It was about outright malice and a readiness to destroy a man's life. As the damning messages flashed on the large screens, revealing the depths of their malevolence, a collective gasp swept through the room. The faces of the remaining unindicted officials watching from the audience turned ashen. Judge Karen, already under arrest, watching from a holding cell, reportedly collapsed upon seeing the full extent of the conspiracy laid bare. The hearing ended abruptly, its purpose fulfilled. The exposed communications sparked a furious public outcry and triggered further, more sweeping federal actions. The police chief resigned immediately, followed by several council members who had been tied to the mayor's corrupt practices. A full federal consent decree was imposed on the city's police department, mandating comprehensive reforms, federal oversight, and retraining. Marcus Tate, the man they tried to erase, had not only cleared his name, but had become a catalyst for profound change. He had turned the chaos into momentum, pushing for justice that extended far beyond his own case. He became a symbol of resistance against systemic injustice, his quiet strength and unwavering commitment to truth inspiring countless others. He didn't seek power, but he had wielded it effectively, not through violence, but through the relentless pursuit of facts and the courage to expose them. The oppressors were outmaneuvered, their network of lies dismantled, and the city, once suffocated by corruption, began a painful but necessary journey towards accountability and reform, all thanks to the unwavering resolve of one Marine sniper.